Welcome back. Today we are talking about my most worn perfumes in the month of July 2024. So as always, I'm only going to cover the perfumes that I wore the most. If you want to see a full list of everything I wore throughout the month, then that will be in a blog post on my website, and I will link that in the description below. I have 7 perfumes that I wore several times in the month of July, and a couple of little honourable mentions as well, just ones that I would like to highlight at the end of this video. So the first fragrance I want to talk about is this one here. This is called Tears and Dew by Frasai. I hope I'm saying that right. Tears and Dew. I absolutely loved wearing this perfume. This is a fairly newish bottle. I actually bought it, I think, towards the end of 2023, so over the Christmas period of 2023. I bought it because I had a sample of it and I felt like it actually did smell a little bit like Christmas. However, Christmas where I live is very hot, and this is quite a gourmand leaning type of perfume, so I didn't actually end up wearing it that much over the Christmas period because it was just a little bit too heavy for that. However, for one of the coldest months of the year for us here in Australia, the month of July is the perfect time to reach for this one. And actually I decided to wear it to bed one night and I loved it so much that I wore it again immediately the next day as my scent of the day. It's a very comforting scent. It's, as I said, it's slightly gourmand leaning. That's probably coming from a lot of the spices. It develops a little bit of it kind of has a bit of a biscuity feel in the opening, or kind of a cakey, spicy, biscuity feel. But that over time during the wear does settle down and it develops more into a kind of a vintage feeling perfume rather than a full-blown gourmand. So it does change throughout the wear and becomes kind of less foody and more perfumey, but it still retains that lovely spice and calming tea-like aspect. This perfume actually does generate quite strong imagery in my mind, and the image that I get in my mind when I'm smelling it, is that of an old school English kitchen inside an old school English manor. So it's the dark tones, but it's also warm and inviting, and the smell of the food cooking mingling with a brew of warm tea on the stovetop. That's the imagery that I get. So I'm getting this image of sitting at this big, long timbered table or bench with a cup of tea, warming my hands in this sort of kind of dingy atmosphere, but again, it's sort of warm and welcoming at the same time. Anyway, so that is what Tears and Dew smells like to me, or at least that's how it makes me feel. It's a very comforting wear, this one, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wore it 4 times throughout the month of July. The next one is one that is possibly a bit of a surprise for some people, or one that people might not expect to necessarily find in my perfume wardrobe, given my tastes generally. And this is Gozo by Jeroboam. I actually really love the bottle of this. They did at some stage come out with a limited edition bottle, which was just transparent and colourless. And for a while in Australia, that was the only one you could get because there's only one perfumery in Australia that stocks this perfume. And for ages, they just had this sort of special limited edition bottle. So I held off on buying it for ages until they got some of these bottles back in stock because I wanted the orange bottle. This is primarily a white floral perfume, specifically tuberose. And when I first tried this, I was a little bit put off by it because it does open very sweet and it has this sort of plasticky doll's head aspect to it. And the very first time I ever tried it, I only sprayed it on paper and I kind of wrote it off as something that I wouldn't enjoy because it was so sweet in the opening. And then when we were in Europe last year, I went into a perfumery and I just happened to try it, and I actually spritzed it on skin. And I was really surprised because even though, yes, it opens very sweet, It's quite loud in the opening as well. And it has that, as I said, plasticky doll's head aspect to it. Actually, as it wears on the skin, it goes in a completely different direction than I expected. I just expected it to stay sweet and possibly even get sweeter, but it doesn't. It actually, in the dry down, develops this more earthy characteristic, probably coming from the patchouli. And it is actually a really very pleasant perfume to wear. And it also has quite some presence as well. So other people around you will undoubtedly notice it. And it has a very pleasing scent bubble. So this has been a real surprise addition to my wardrobe. I never expected I would ever own this or even want to own it, but it's actually one that I'm happy to reach for on a regular basis now. So that is Gozo by Jeroboam, and I wore it 4 times. All right, so the next one I also wore 4 times, and I also wore this in combination accidentally on one of the days with Gozo, and it was a really great combination. This is Levant by Ormond Jane. Now, funny story, this particular bottle was sent to me in PR, but I actually also own another bottle of this. I had bought a bottle of it earlier in the year, and then they sent me a bottle in PR. So I now have 2 bottles of Levant, and I'm not complaining about it. It's a lovely perfume and it's really easy to wear. So I'm sure I will make my way through both bottles over time. I did unbox this one and open it and spray it because I wanted to see if there was any difference between this one and the old bottle, and there isn't. This is one that wasn't a love for me immediately in the Route de la Soie line, and that's just because there were other ones in the line that grabbed my attention first, like Xian was my instant love, and Tanja as well was another one that immediately grabbed my attention. This one sort of grew on me over time, but I really, really enjoy this now. This is a really lovely, musky, white floral. It's got quite a bit of citrus in the top. There's peony and orange blossom and a little bit of jasmine as well, I think. It has sort of a really light, woody, musky base. So there's a bit of cedar in the base, and it's got a bit of an ambery tone to it as well. There's a bit of sweetness there. So it's a really delightful perfume to wear and very inoffensive. Smells very elegant and put together. And there was one day where I accidentally layered this with Gozo. I didn't mean to necessarily, but I put Gozo on in the morning, and then I had to go out for an appointment, and I put a jumper on, and the jumper that I decided to wear for the day actually had Levant sprayed on it from the day before, and it was really, really noticeable. You could still really smell it. So I ended up kind of wearing both. And then I actually got 2 compliments on my perfume that day. So that was really nice. Anyway, so that is Levant by Ormond Jane. I wore it 4 times. Another one from Ormond Jane that I wore 4 times is Ormond Woman. I have talked about this many, 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 many times. This was the perfume that kind of put Ormond Jane on my radar. This and Sampakita, I think. And Ormond Woman in particular was one that as soon as I smelled it and started wearing it, I realized this could very easily become a little bit of a signature for me. And I still stand by that. Heaven forbid if I ever found myself without any perfume and I had to go buy a bottle of perfume to be satisfied with just one bottle, this would be at the top of my list. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and it's so different and so unique. It doesn't smell like anything else in my wardrobe or anything else that I've smelled before. It's very spicy, it's very woody, it's very green. The greenness in here reminds me of dark forest vegetation with some really beautiful florals blended through. The florals just give a bit of softness. There's a lot of woodiness in the base as well, a lot of cardamom in the top. It's so different and it's popular, and I can understand why it is so popular. This bottle, you can't really tell from this angle, but it's about 1/3 full. I'm heading towards the last dregs of this bottle. And I actually already do have another bottle in my wardrobe that I can dig out once this is finished. When they decided to change the bottles in the line, a lot of the older bottles went on sale or ended up at discounters, and I managed to get my hands on one of the big 120ml bottles of this for a really, really good price. So I am set for Ormond Woman for quite some time. And it is funny because, you know, I talk about this being my signature. This perfume just smells like me. For some reason, this perfume just resonates with my personality, I think, or how I view myself. And one of my friends, whenever he sees me, he'll often ask if I'm wearing this. Usually I am. He just always assumes I'm wearing Ormond Woman. So in a way, it really has become my signature over time and what people sort of associate with me. So that is Ormond Woman by Ormond Jane, and I wore that 4 times. Next up is another Ormond Jane. It was definitely an Ormond Jane month. This is another bottle that's very hard to film because it's highly reflective. So in the month of June, I talked about Montebaco Flor, and I mentioned this one, which is Montebaco Cuba. I managed to pick up a bottle of this in a sale, and I am very glad that I did. I am really, really loving the Montebaco DNA from Ormond Jane. It's just such a fantastic DNA for a perfume, and I think perfectly unisex, although some people might argue that it is more masculine leaning. But I love it. I love the original. I love the Montebaco Flor. I love this one. I also love the Montebaco Verano. There's just something about this scent profile. It's citrusy, spicy. You've got the tobacco in there, but the tobacco is not heavy and dense like it comes off in a lot of other tobacco dominant perfumes. It's very translucent and airy and kind of dry. And then you have this sort of suede-y, leathery element in there too, but that also is very delicate. It's not too heavy, it's not too dark. And I don't know, there's just something about this scent profile that lends to it the ability to really transform and go in a lot of different directions. So you've got the Montebaco Flor, which is really, you know, floral based, lots of jasmine and white florals. And then you've got this one, which is very, very citrusy, also quite a lot of florals as well, but it's like juicy citruses. The Verano is juicy and citrusy as well, but it's sort of more green. And then the original has a bit more of the spice in the opening, and the florals and the citruses are kind of toned, more sort of toned down. But I guess what I mean is that the original, the spices are sort of more, everything's sort of more evenly blended in the original formulation. So it's a great, great perfume profile, and I am not at all worried about having this one plus the Montebaco Flor plus the travel size of the original, because I really do wear them. I wear them a lot. They go with everything. I layer them under other things. And this one in particular, I like to wear when I'm going outdoors or if I'm going to the gym, because it's just really juicy and fresh and bright, and it's a very pleasant perfume. It's also very strong. I don't need to wear too much of it, you know, just a couple of sprays and I'm done. And it's also very diffusive, so other people can smell you as well. This is, I can tell, going to become a bit of a workhorse in my perfume wardrobe. I think it's just one that, you know, I can wear all year round. It really suits all seasons. Even though this one is quite citrusy, I feel like it would still work in the cooler months, and as evidenced by the fact that I did wear this a lot. It's one of my most worn for July, which is one of our coldest months. So it does withstand the cool months really, really well. So that is Montebaco Cuba, and I wore it 4 times. All right, so the next one is one that's very, very popular in the fragrance community. This is Gris Chanel. I wore it 5 times in the month of July. This works really, really well in the winter months. It took me ages to buy a bottle of this because I had so many samples of it. I first tried it back in 2020, I think, during, you know, the whole lockdown period. And I did post about it in my stories and on my Instagram. I really enjoyed it at the time. I particularly am drawn to the cardamom that's in here. I really like cardamom, and so does Matt. But I was never really enticed to buy a bottle because I always had half a dozen samples of this on hand at any given time. This was just shoved down our throats, basically, from the perfumeries. Whenever you bought a perfume, you were given one, sometimes multiple samples of Gris Chanel. So I have worn it a lot over the years. I've just never actually had a bottle of it. And then earlier this year, I finally used up my last sample and I decided to buy a bottle. It's been talked about ad nauseum on social media and on YouTube, so I don't think I need to spend a huge amount of time explaining it to you. But suffice to say, it's basically a woody tea scent. Some people liken it to chai tea. Yes, I get the chai tea bent, and I understand that description. But this is it's just a very easy one to wear. It's squarely unisex. It doesn't lean too gourmand. And when I talk about gourmand, I'm talking about it doesn't smell like a dessert necessarily, even though there is quite a lot of cardamom in it. It really is very tea and woody centric with that cardamom spice in the opening. It's really lovely, and I understand the hype and the love for this perfume in the community. So that is Gris Chanel by BDK, and I wore it 5 times. And then finally, the perfume that I wore the most in the month of July, and I wore it a whopping 11 times that I recorded, is LA by Trudon. I did talk about this in the June lineup as well. It was one of my most worn in June, and here it is again. And I feel like I just lived in this perfume in the month of July. I just could not stop wearing it. I absolutely love it. I think I mentioned in the last video, or the video for June, that, you know, it didn't receive great reviews online in the fragrance community. A lot of people just really didn't enjoy it. I think it's fantastic. It's, without wanting to go back again into too much detail, basically it's a white floral perfume. There's also a bit of yellow floral as well. So there's ylang ylang and jasmine. There's some neroli in there as well, which gives it a slight soapiness. It's got a base of really blonde sort of woods in it. There's also, I think, a thread of sort of slightly smoky incense that runs through it as well. It just smells really fresh, very clean, very elegant, and I can't get enough of it. And I feel like I can't wear too much of it either. I can spray a lot and I don't feel like it becomes overwhelming. It does create a beautiful scent bubble around you, and it also layers really well with other things. So I'm wearing it a lot, and there's a reason for it. It's a very easy one to reach for. So that is LA by Trudon, and I wore it 11 times. It was my most worn in the month of July. So just a couple of honorable mentions in the month of July. I did have a couple of new perfumes come into my wardrobe. The first one is Irida, and this is by Angelos Creations. This perfume was, or the extrait, I think, of this perfume was a finalist in the Art and Olfaction Awards this year. And being an iris-centric perfume, I definitely didn't hesitate to try and track down some samples and test it out. You can actually get samples directly from Angelos Creations, which is exactly what I did. And there's some really beautiful perfumes in the range. In fact, he sent, when I ended up buying this full bottle, he sent me a sample of, I think it's called Angeliki, and that is also a really fabulous perfume. I've really enjoyed wearing that sample, and I will talk about that at another time. This is a very lovely green, naturalistic orris perfume. It's very buttery and slightly powdery. It's not sweet. It does have, as I mentioned, sort of a greenness to it. But that's very, very subtle, the greenness. It's not super, super green. It's also kind of earthy, but as I say, it just feels like a really natural perfume. And it just feels like a complete overdose of orris. So if you don't like orris butter, you probably won't have any interest in this at all whatsoever. It's pretty linear as well. It doesn't really change that much. It really is just showcasing orris, I think. It is that really sort of carroty, vegetable-like orris butter, which I actually quite enjoy, but a lot of people don't like. As it dries down, I do feel like I get, you know, a bit more floral aspects to it. So there is violet in here as well, which is kind of green leaning. And then I'm guessing some white florals, some kind of white floral, but I couldn't really tell you what they are, to be honest, because they're so subtly blended within this perfume. So that is Irida, the Eau de Parfum by Angelos Creations Olfactives. And then the other one that came into my wardrobe this month, which I have been wanting for a while now. I sampled it a few months ago. This is Delta of Venus by Eris Parfums. I am just loving this perfume. I'm really loving most of Eris Parfums perfumes, actually. I did buy the Discovery set. My first love from this brand was Marbet, and I almost bought that, to be honest. There's a bit of a cat hair on that. I almost bought that, but when I went to Spain a few months ago, I wore Marbet and it was really animalic when I was in Europe. It felt so animalic, but when I'm here in Brisbane, it doesn't smell that way. I've worn it so many times now and I can't get my head around how animalic and kind of challenging it was for me when I was in Spain, but then here I really love it. So I don't know, I'm in two minds. I don't know if I really desperately need it that badly, even though it was my favorite from the line, but this is a very close second, or perhaps now it is my favorite from the line because I ended up buying this one. This is a fruity floral perfume for grown-up women. You know, I always struggle with fruity perfumes because they always smell so kind of young and, you know, frivolous, and it just feels like they don't really match my personality necessarily. And I feel kind of uncomfortable when I'm wearing really fruity perfumes, even though you can wear whatever you want, whenever you want, and it really doesn't matter. And to other people, a fruity perfume is really pleasing to smell, but yeah, I don't know. I struggle with fruity perfumes most of the time. But this I do not struggle with. It somehow comes off as very elegant, very sophisticated, whilst still being very squarely fruity. The main fruit that's present in here is guava, and it just has this really luscious, full-bodied feel to it. And it's coupled with some really green notes like Iranian galbanum, which I believe has now been banned from perfumery. I think it was Iranian galbanum. I think Jane Daly had posted on Instagram a couple of weeks ago that, you know, that this note has now been sort of banned. I don't know if it's banned because I haven't delved into why yet, but I just know that she posted about it because apparently Eau de Jane also has Iranian galbanum in it as well. So I'm kind of glad I got this now because I feel like they're going to have to find a substitute for the galbanum that's in here. Anyway, it's a really sparkly, but also luscious and green, woody, fruity perfume. And it's absolutely stunning, stunning, stunning. I did have a sample of this when I went to Bali and I happily wore it in Bali. I thought it was great. And even though I'm not really looking forward to summer because I prefer the colder months and summer in Brisbane is just unbearably hot, but this is something that I can look forward to wearing in summer. So I cannot wait to start wearing this one. So that is Delta of Venus by Eris Parfums, and they are my two new additions to my perfume wardrobe in the month of July. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're still here, please do give this a thumbs up or subscribe if you are not already subscribed, or if you want to see more from me. And as I mentioned, the full list of everything that I wore will be in a blog post that I'll link below. And if you are new to my channel and you're enjoying this particular style of video, I will also link the playlist to all of the other videos of this style so that you can go check out what I wore in other months of the year. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.